All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 203 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I'm Billy Bob. I'm on the West Coast. It's 9 a.m. That's why I tell everyone good morning, but it is either 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. for our special guest, Leo Zhao, streaming live from East Berlin. What time is it, sir?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Okay, and then I'm pretty sure it's 7 p.m. in Crimea. Where is Ian? Have you left your dacha, Ian?
No, I'm still here, and it's 7 p.m. here. But it's also 7 p.m. in Moscow, so even if I was there, it would same time zone.
How many time zones in Russia, actually?
Great question. A lot.
Yeah? Man, they should align themselves with China, because China has one time zone. That makes everything very, very simple and very, very simple across the entire country.
That's interesting.
Well, well, that would cause some problems because Russia is very long. It's very long, so you would literally imagine if you had to do a meeting like this, but for work, and it's night for some people and morning for others, and you're trying to be in the same time zone. It would be.
Well, no, I mean you would be exactly. I mean you would be used to it, right? Like 7 p.m. would mean something, would mean what it means for you, and you would be used to it, and everybody would be like, "Oh yeah, let's talk at 7," and everybody would be like, "Cool." But yeah, I mean it's pretty wide. Is it twice as wide as China? No, it's like maybe a third wider than China.
On the map, it's very distorted. Longer.
There was only one time zone in China, and I thought Russia maybe had 9 time zones, but
it's 11. It's 11. Looked it up.
11.
It's 11.
Okay. That's a lot. So. Anyway, yeah. So when I say good morning, it's only morning for me. Our 203rd episode, and we're going to talk about a couple things. First of all, let me recommend everyone go to thereadingjunkie.com, which is Ian's blog, and he's pinned a couple articles on consent and talking about consent, and also how that relates to one of the biggest, most hot button issues, that we deal with domestically in the United States, which is, wokeism versus anti-wokeism, and but it's a detailed, engaged topic that is going to take some thoughtfulness to really explore, and so. Maybe I can throw it to Ian and have him kind of just introduce it, how you see things, Ian.
Yeah. So, guys, I'm on. As you may have noticed, I'm very tiny and long tonight, just because I'm on my phone. So, if you have trouble hearing me, just let me know, and I'll troubleshoot it. But, anyways, so the basis of this article. So it actually. I started writing this because I watched an older movie. It's called A Man for All Seasons. It's a classic 1970s movie about Thomas More. He was an English nobleman in the late 16th century when Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife. I think her name was Catherine. Wanted to divorce his wife because he had no children. He wanted to try again with the second wife, but the Pope would not give him a divorce. So he actually split from the Catholic Church, created the Anglican Church with himself as the head of that church, and granted himself a divorce so he could marry again. Now, Thomas More was a man of faith. He was absolutely against this. And in the context, just to, for a modern audience, in the context of this, if you don't recognize someone's divorce, then that means the second wife is bigamy. So it's a sin. It's very bad. So he was absolutely against the marriage, but he didn't protest it. He didn't, make a scene. He didn't cause any dissent against the king. However, his silence was, because King got everybody else's approval. Everybody else's approval in the country. Everybody went to the wedding. Everybody blessed the marriage. Thomas More did not. So that made the king so mad. This one guy, was not endorsing the marriage. He actually tried him for treason and ultimately beheaded him. Unfortunately, he was eventually, I don't think he was a saint. He was recognized as a martyr of the Catholic Church. The Pope actually recognized him as a martyr. It was a lot later, though, like early 20th century. He recognized him as a martyr. There might have been some 20th century politics involved in that too, anti-English politics. I'm not sure, but ultimately, when I was watching this movie, it was very interesting because they take him before Parliament. They accuse him of treason, and he was a lawyer, by the way. He was a trained lawyer, so he was a very informed defense. So his defense was that, it's you can't try someone for treason against the king if he's never spoken against the king. And the exact term he uses is silence is consent. When a man is silent, that you take that as agreements. He's not rebelling against the government. He's just quietly going about his day. And that was the basis of his argument. And that really got me thinking. And I actually revisited another famous movie, V for Vendetta, which is the Wachowskis. They're sisters now. The revolutionary movie. It's set in dystopian Britain with this right-wing, very traditional right-wing state. And V, the revolutionary, and we can't play it. It'd be good to play that clip. Of course, it would give us a copyright strike, so we can't. So just go to the article, it's in the description if you want to see the clip. But near the beginning of the movie, he makes this speech to the British, this televised speech to the British people, basically condemning them. It's like this guy, this right-wing dictator took power, and you silently consent. He just asked for your silence consent. So it was just really interesting to me that these 400 years apart, you have a king who's saying that no, you can't just silently consent. And then you have the revolutionary. It's actually, the roles are almost reversed. You have the revolutionary saying, no, you can't just silently consent. And what he ends up doing is he sends his mask and costumes to all of the people in London, and asks them to come out on the streets and watch the revolution, basically. And that was meant to show that all the people in London consented to the new regime that he's building. So he didn't want people to just stay at home and be like, oh, this guy overthrew the government. He wanted them to consent to the new regime he was building. So that's the basis of the article to start with.
I don't remember V saying like we should consent with the surveillance state. Did he?
He did not. He said, his exact words was that this guy. I don't remember verbatim what he said, but he basically said this guy took over, and all he asked for was your silent consent. That was the exact way he phrased it. Right. So he's not referring to himself. He's referring to the government. Right.
And at the end, he never even began to formulate a new political body. It was only demolition of the BBC tower and the apparatus.
Well, I mentioned that, and that's a good point. But in a sense, he did, because he spent a lot of the movie with Natalie Portman's character. So he's converting someone to his way of thinking. So even after he's dead, there is someone to carry on with his cause after he's dead. And that's because he does literally torture that person. He basically brainwashes that person to agree with him. It's probably the most controversial scene in the movie, but he does leave someone behind to carry on his work, if you will. Because you're right, he didn't himself build a new government. He just destroyed the old one and then died. So, but presumably leaving behind people who agree with them and who have the popular mandate of all the people of Britain, they can presumably set up that new government even without him. So that's my interpretation of how he did that.
And so,
Sure. I mean, him educating Natalie Portman, I mean, I think it's a leap from that to, requiring consent for a new power structure. I mean, I mean, that was only an educational process. I mean, it's a narrative device, right? Like the whole thing. I mean, I see it as education. With limited time, that's the best way to get her to understand the realities that we are in. But in the real world, that process is the motorcycle diaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
The motorcycle diaries, where Che, or before he called himself Che, rode around South America and saw the destitution, the absolute misery of the masses, right? And he woke up. So, like, in the real world, Natalie Portman's, ordeal process would be like something like that, or like, a process that all revolutionaries go through. But yeah, I mean, to call the V for Vendetta character, a revolutionary, I would say he's an insurrectionary. He's an insurrectionist. I'm not sure he was a revolutionary because. Yeah,
it's a fair distinction, yes, because he started a insurrection against the government. It's not quite that's true. It's not quite the same thing. I mean, it can be part of a revolution, but it's not the whole.
Yeah. I mean, the revolution in a Marxist sense is the people, the majority, right, taking control of the state, and he wanted to demolish the state. But anyway.
But Ian, I was hoping you could. I mean, I followed everything that you were explaining, and I want you to explain, how you think that relates to contemporary reality or to our current situation, either domestically or internationally. Like, what is the relevance, and how does it tie into, what matters to people right now?
Well, so the culture war debate, which has changed a little bit in the USA specifically, not globally, but in the USA specifically. You had Trump, and you have this whole narrative. You have a couple sides of this narrative. On one hand, you have conservatives and Republicans say, "Oh, it's woke nonsense," it's virtue signaling, which is a term they use derisively. And then on the other hand, you have leftists, not liberal leftists, but leftists, hard, what can I say, hard leftists, are also critical of saying, it's divisive, it's counterproductive. And I would say that's not even an incorrect statement. I mean, of course, it's counterproductive if you're trying to overthrow the government. Of course, things that divide the masses are going to harm you, but look at it from the regime's perspective. It's a great way to build conformity to the state's ideology. And I think what gets people hung up on the state when we talk about, very divisive, we talk about immigration, we talk about transgender rights, we talk about LGBT, you name it, all these issues, women's rights, and all these issues that people fight about. I mean, there is a state. There's like an ideologically correct position for each of those, and I think people get hung up on it's not having the correct view on LGBT that they care about. It's that it's a loyalty test. It's a loyalty test. So you pick positions you know are controversial, and to get everybody, and you can get everybody to, in their daily lives, agree with this thing. So even if they're lying, if you say something often enough, you'll eventually believe it. So if you have a state ideology, you require people, put it in your email signature, wear the pins, the flag, they put it in your daily life. So you can't avoid it. And so what that does in, dare I say, first world countries, Western countries, whatever you want to call them, that cements the regime in place because they're already in power in those places. And what it does in more conservative countries, what they consider uncivilized countries like Georgia, Belarus, wherever, Latin American countries, wherever you want to put it. Of course, when you push the woke topics, of course, they're going to be very controversial. They're going to create a lot of backlash. But at the same time, it's very appealing to younger people. That's really who they're going after, university students and teenagers. And so you have this bit. So right away, even before you've done anything to that country, you've already created this conflict between the regime that's currently in power, the conservative regime that's in power, and you've created a conflict against them from the younger people in that country. And they agree, even if they don't agree with you politically. Like, I don't think they're necessarily, Georgian protesters are going to be like, oh, well, I agree with invading Iraq. I agree with, BlackRock. I agree with all, they don't necessarily, they probably don't agree with all those things. But if they agree with the state ideology, they're like, we're progressives against this bigoted, backwards, corrupt government that we have. And that's the basis of your color revolution. And when we talk about active, and one thing I talked about in that article is active versus passive or silent consent. Active consent is better for mobilizing people. And you see it in the Velvet Revolution in Armenia. You see it in the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine. You even look at the crowds. That's the chants they do, jump if you're not. Everyone who doesn't jump is a Moscow. And they wear pot. You have, or even having people wear things that are ridiculous, right? Ukrainian protesters would wear pots on their heads, or you can wear the pussy hat. It doesn't matter what you wear. Just have them wear something that's very distinctive and very ridiculous. But it's very important psychologically. So am I making sense so far to everybody? Anyone have a comment on all that?
You are making sense. But I would say that's not exactly a discussion of consent, but rather in how consent is used in our context of a fraudulent ideology that constructs these smoke and mirrors and surfaces to deceive people, right, and to divide them, right? Like, that's like when you say, both sides demand consent, like both sides of the liberals and the conservatives in the US demand consent, like that's happening in a micro context of like many layers of contradictions, many layers of like things that are not working, and things are not what they seem. Like, virtue is not virtue, has been made into something else, and morality has become in the service of immorality, and and so on. So, like, I don't know, do we think a radical thinking of consent itself would be useful here? If we do, allow me to I've been researching on indigenous African political philosophy, right? And I think it's very, very important. Nobody thinks it's important, including Western Marxists. They just think like they won't say it, but they literally think just like people in mud huts. Like, what do we care about them, right? But it's like centrally important, I think, because researching into African indigenous political philosophy leads to insights about all indigenous peoples' political organization, how they organize their society. Uh, and I'm sure we all know that in the last 10 years or so of Karl Marx's life, he increasingly was interested in he increasingly was studying the indigenous people of Russia, of the Siberia, of the Boryat, and all of the dozens of different ethnic groups that live in Siberia. And he read the ethnologists and the archaeologists and the anthropologists of his time extensively, and he argued with them and talked to them, and he increasingly came to even shifts in his thinking that revolution will come from the imperial core, right? This study of indigenous political organization, ancient, right, time immemorial, led him to begin to think that socialism or communism can arise without the colonial powers independently. But anyway, I would like to read this pretty short paragraph from Ghanaian philosopher Kwasi Viridu about African political philosophy. It's pretty short. Decision making in Africa was generally based on consensus. Looking in detail at how this worked among the Ashanti, he notes, quote, this adherence to the principle of consensus was a premeditated option. It was based on the belief that ultimately the interests of all members of society are the same, although their immediate perceptions of those interests may be different. This thought is given expression in an art motif depicting a crocodile with one stomach and two heads locked in struggle over food. If they could but see that the food was, in any case, destined for the same stomach, the irrationality of the conflict would be manifest to them. But is there a chance of consensus? The Ashanti answer is yes. Human beings have the ability to eventually cut through their differences to the rock bottom identity of interests. And on this view, the means of that objective is simply rational discussion. Of the capabilities of this means, the Ashanti are explicit. Quote, there is, they say, no problem of human relations that cannot be resolved by dialogue. Dialogue, of course, presupposes not just two parties at least, but also two conflicting positions. One head does not hold counsel. Nor was any suggestion that one voice might be entitled to be heard to the exclusion of others. Two heads are better than one, says another African maxim. So I would say that this is the understanding of consensus, that it is possible for all human beings to agree on political matters. It is absolutely possible because we are much more the same than we are not. We all want, we all want food, we all want love, we all want a community, we all want to be okay, we all want not to be starving, and we all want to a chance to pursue our higher callings, right? We all want to be creative or heal people or whatever. We want to do what we want to do, right? So ultimately, like, I think a politics of consensus is absolutely the norm for human beings, for the Homo sapiens sapiens species. All the contradictions come with the rise of proprietary patriarchy, right? When political power, becomes dominated by those who own land, slaves, cattle, what have you, right? The first empires, the Assyrians, the Phoenicians, even older than that, the Babylonians, the first empire is around 6,000 years ago. They arose based on property, based on ownership, right? So all of a sudden, the decision-making powers is taken from the people, from the people, and given to these people who own everything, one or two individuals, or the royal family, the king, the monarchs. I mean, we can go into the specifics of African society, how it is actually, how consensus is functions, if you want, but I don't know if it's important now.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, the most rudimentary government has to be built on consensus. I know tribes are often depicted as, there's this one strong guy who just bullies everyone to do what he wants, but that's not correct. That's all, and it's pretty universal. I think you go to any continent, there's some sort of consensus-based system those tribes follow. Even if you look at other groups of people who move away from the comforts of home, like the wagon trains, the American wagon trains that would go west, they were actually democratically led. They would vote on the caravan leader. If they were unhappy, even if it was things that weren't necessarily the caravan leader's fault, they were just having a hard time, they might hold a special election and elect a new guy. So it was very common for those wagon trains to have more than one leader as they're progressing across the country. As far as empires go, what, like those examples you mentioned, Babylon is one of the oldest, might be the oldest, I don't know, the first government that established an idea of fairness, an idea of a code of law, that even slaves have rights, that you can't just, kill a slave if you felt like, Hammurabi's code. It's established all the rules, like for bearing witness against people. And I think if you look at every civilization, you have, one or a few, maybe several figures who established some sort of system. Like they have Solon, the lawgiver in Greece, who established rights for the rural population outside the city. Putin really likes Yaroslav the Wise, similar reason. When Tucker Carlson interviewed, he really liked Yaroslav the Wise, and it's like, why? Well, because he didn't just unify the country, he also established a code of law for everybody to follow. So when I talk about, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that when you say civilizations, different civilizations all developed some kind of democracy or democratic aspirations. I would just characterize that as movements out of the hole that we dug for ourselves. Like, as far as what I'm concerned, 6,000 years ago, there was a world historic, global counter-revolution in which society became dominated by one or two, by extreme minority segment of society that owns all the land and slaves. And of course, as time goes on, these states do have people who like, hey, why don't we try like equality or consensus? Those are like little movements, against that counter-revolution, little movements, sort of back to the original, or like, against this counter-revolution. And I would say those, I mean, they are exceptions, right? They are exceptions within a fraudulent system of domination, war, slavery, right? These people are exceptions, but these movements are I mean, we are part of that movement. And also, I would just like add one thing, like Native Americans, right? The tribal society, they are also in a process of historical change and evolution, if you will. Like, for example, the Apache were absolutely brutal warrior culture, right? They lived off of raiding, raping, and raiding other groups. They were for sure very dominated by by a warrior chief or whatever. And then there were at the same time other Native American tribes that were very much egalitarian, that were very much proto-communist. So I would say like it's a historical process of like all of these tribes becoming enculturated with illegitimate hierarchy to various extents. But anyway.
Yeah, so when I'm talking about, active consent, I don't necessarily mean just consensus, because every government needs some degree of consensus. I know in Western media, there's this narrative that, you have strong arm societies, that you have, the strong man who runs the place and it's all his decisions. But ultimately, every country, every nation state, regardless of the type of government, needs a consensus. They need to adequately, there's just the hierarchy of needs. People need food, people need electricity, people need national defense. Just the list of things, of basic things that people consider important. That government needs to address those things, and does to some extent need a consensus. It can't overtly oppose the social consensus for a prolonged period of time. No government can survive doing that. Of course, they can shape consensus. They can artificially shape consensus, and more modern governments are good at that. But you do need a consensus. But that's not necessarily exactly what I mean by active consent. What I mean by that is actually, excuse me. It's more than just people say, oh, well, I agree or disagree, inside. It's very much shaping the people to a certain ideology, which strengthens it. Right. Now, I do think there was a revolution in Marxist thoughts, because Marxism was the first in modern history that the peasants, the workers, their opinions actually matter. So we're going to educate them, and we're going to make them politically conscious and actively participating in this revolution and government. So that, and they did that to a greater extent than anyone before. Before that, the kings of Europe, they didn't really even care if people knew how to read. You'd have maybe 10 or 15% of the population that knew how to read, and the rest were illiterate. Just why would you even need to, excuse me, educate the people? I mean, what's the point? It doesn't serve any purpose. It wasn't even that they hated the people or didn't want them to. It's just why? What is the purpose of educating?
No, I would say it's not that they're not interested in people not educating. It's not that they don't care. Like, what's the use of educating people? I think they absolutely actively prevented education. They forbade the teaching of reading. They were absolutely, all the monarchs, all of the illegitimate power structures actively suppressed learning. I mean, we can look at the Protestant Revolution, right? The Protestant Revolution, a big part of it was everybody should be able to read the Bible. Whereas before, it was only the priests that could read the Bible and interpret it according to their desires, to their interests. And the Protestant Revolution, said everybody should be able to read the Bible. And what did the Holy Roman Catholic Church do? Brutal repression, right? Like mass torture and mass killing of the Protestant, anti-Reformation, right? Wars. They started wars against that. So I would say there's an active interest to suppress education by capitalist powers. And the communist, socialist countries were the exact opposite. The first thing they did was education. Like within 20 years, illiteracy was eliminated in the Soviet Union. Within 20 years, illiteracy was eliminated in Cuba. Within 20 years, illiteracy was eliminated in China.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm listening and I'm trying to figure out where we're going and, you know, what our core differences are, or, you know, what we're talking about. So, I mean, I kind of understand what Leo's saying, and I kind of agree that, you know, it's a good way to conceptualize things. You know, 6,000 years ago, you started having a tiny minority of elites that are benefiting disproportionately from the way society is organized, and they wanted to maintain that system because they disproportionately benefited from it to the detriment of everybody else. And so, you know, socialism is kind of actually, you know, trying to, start a revolution, overthrow the minority leadership class, and organize a system that benefits everybody, not just, a few elites. And so that's the conceptual framework that we have. And I'm wondering, you know, what, is that something that, you know, Ian disagrees with? It's hard to tell, what, if there's, you know, I can't quite follow the discussion, the back and forth discussion. I mean, are we in agreement that is kind of what's going on? How does consent factor into this situation? So again, Leo would say that, you know, they manufacture consent, right? That the ruling elites, you know, utilize their propaganda apparatus to manufacture consent, and they have a variety of methods from more coercive to less coercive. But the bottom line is they want to maintain a system that they disproportionately benefit from, you know, to the detriment of the masses. And so that's, you know, that's what socialists think is going on. Liberals don't see it like that. And so I'm trying to, I want Ian to engage and either, explain why that's not true, explain what is more true.
I think what it comes down to, and the importance question every politically involved person needs to ask himself, is, do people have the right to their own opinions, even if they're different than mine? Can a person just say, well, you know what, this is my idea of marriage between a man and a woman. Only men and women who are married can adopt children, no single parents, no same-sex parents, you know, or you can pick any culture war topic, not just gay marriage. You know, are people allowed to have their own opinions? Now, if we look at, you know, the self-described, woke advocates will say no, because that is harming other people. Your opinion harms other people. That's the justification. It's not necessarily even wrong, because yes, obviously, if, you know, more than half of a population thinks gay marriage should be illegal, then it will probably be illegal, and that does affect people. So it is a correct statement. The question is, how much is does conformity, ideological conformity, overrule personal liberty? And my whole point in this article is that the people who say even if they say they're for personal liberty, no, it's all about ideological conformity. And the reason why is because that's how the regime gets power. They need people to all not just agree, not even just silently agree. I kind of agree with, I don't care that much. I don't particularly care about gay marriage or, whatever. That's not enough. They have to say, I agree. I love it. If we look at George Orwell, the infamous George Orwell in 1984, who he framed it and also claims when asked about it, he framed it on the Soviet Union. Well, no, it's really actually not a good depiction of the Soviet Union. Why? Well, because the Soviets did not care as much about those things as his book portrays it. It is, however, an accurate description of how the British feel. So even if the British have a right-wing government or a left-wing, and that's one of the things I explicitly say in that article, that every nation of people, whether it's right-wing or left-wing, will have their own cultural norms in that government, because everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's culturally a little bit different, has somewhat different values. I mean, there's certain things that we can probably agree are universal. Murder is bad. Eventually, everyone agrees slavery is bad. You know, there's certain things you get everybody to agree, but there's still cultural differences, and every country will have their own unique version of that, regardless of what government they have. So 1984 isn't really a description of Russia or the Soviet Union. It is, however, a very good description of Britain. And why is that? Because they have this it goes back hundreds of years, this idea that someone, that thoughts crime, someone just thinking something different, threatens the regime. And Leo, you brought up the religious wars. Well, it's true the French and the German Catholics were brutal to the Protestants. Well, the English Protestants, the Anglicans, were also brutal to the Catholics. And for the same reason, because they want that conformity. And so that's the entire basis of the argument. You have a different ideology. Well, we're nothing like those bigoted religious people. We're progressive. Well, it serves the same purpose. That's the core of my argument. And we like to project. We project these things on China. We project on China. We project it on Russia. We project it on Cuba. Then you actually pay attention to those because they're not nearly as obsessed with that mental conformity that we are.
Yeah. What you're saying is objectively true and empirically so about George Orwell, because he was stationed as a British officer in Indonesia for a number of years prior to writing 1984. And what he wrote was exactly and only a description of the British colonial rule in Indonesia. So, and then later he sold it as a depiction of the USSR in order to get that CCF Benjamins. But yeah, what was your second point about consensus?
My second.
No. What are you saying about? Yeah.
Every government needs consensus.
Right. What? I mean, okay. In China, actually, there are politicians in the government who like liberalism. There are politicians who openly say China should become more like the United States. We should have, bourgeois free market, and that's the road forward for China. They don't have very much political power because not very many people agree with them, but they're allowed to say such things in China. And there's a vibrant debate culture within the state itself, and of course the people as well. Versus in the United States, when Bernie Sanders merely said not everything in Cuba is terrible, he was canceled immediately. He was attacked from all sides, and it partially cost him the nomination. So I guess what we want is a plurality of opinions, right? With education, with an ongoing process of education, of thinking, of debate. That's what we want. And when it comes to specific things like gay marriage or like gender issues, and these things are not solvable at our present time. There is no one correct answer for everything, right? Like of course, we're anti-sexism. You know, women should be equal. But you know, there are many things that are ultimately true, but not true today in the context of contemporary culture, like the in the context of the current development of human society, right? I mean, abolition of the family, right? Of the nuclear family. I mean, if we look at it, nuclear family is only a few hundred years old. It's actually as old as capitalism. Before that, it was more of an extended family, and before extended families characterized the feudal system, and before that, families were much larger. You have, you know, a group of 100, 200, 300 people who live together, and they're basically a family, right? So like abolition of the nuclear family, I would say, is a long-term goal of all people who are interested in liberation. But we cannot force that on people now. We cannot advocate it. That's not a flag that we should fly, because, you know, the present day reality is that the nuclear family is the last little bit of refuge, comfort for the working class, when society is already so atomized, so alienated, so separated, so fragmented. There's no community anywhere in the West. So you cannot go to people like communists, revolutionaries, leftists should not go around and say, like, abolish the nuclear family. You know, like, that's just a silly, you know, counterproductive thing to do. So.
And I think, I mean, you're probably going to get disagreement, you know, among self-described Marxists or socialists that that's an ultimate goal. I think that's a controversial statement. I understand. It definitely doesn't have unanimous support, you know, amongst those, you know, that call themselves, that I would consider actual, you know, non-Western Marxists, non-Western leftists. But no, I you know, it's an interesting discussion, and I mean, I would like to, you know, hear both sides of that. But that is a little bit far afield from the current topic. Ian, what did you have a thought about? I mean, I wanted to say some things about, you know, censorship and freedom of speech, but did you have a thought before I jump into that?
Yes, just on Leo's point about China tolerating liberalism, even not just from private citizens, but from politicians. And what's interesting about that, and this is kind of, I would say it's a Trojan horse. That, not to say that, oh, you know, all this free speech is bad, but it is a Trojan horse that they use to get their foot in the door. And we actually just saw that in Hungary. Orban was lost the election to, gosh, what's his name? Magyar? Is that his name? I'm drawing a blank on his name, the new guy. But basically, and I wrote a post about that. I was like, guys, you know, you're screwed. You know, it's over. You're toast. Hungary's toast. Of course, even like Hungarian people on my social media are like, no, that's true. He was corrupt. He's bad. And this guy's promising blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. And just today I saw the news. He's actually getting the Constitution, the Hungarian Constitution, rewritten to force out Orban's remaining supporters. So that's the and that's the tactic that the U.S.-led bloc uses. Once they got their guy in office, it's like, you know, it's like, you know, people are giving comments here. It's like, you know, Orban. I thought Orban was a dictator. How'd this other guy win the election? Well, now you can't. You can vote these guys in, but then it becomes impossible to vote them out, and that's the trick. They just legislate it, so you can't get rid of them. Once the regime is in power, you can't get rid of them.
How does, like, I agree with that. How does that relate to anything we've talked about? Make it make sense, because I can't connect them.
That's just it's not true. It is a tangent, but it was just in reference to his comments about China not suppressing it. And it's actually the same for, you know, every bad, quote unquote, bad regime. They do tend to tolerate free speech more than they're given credit for, but it's used against them. It's used against them because it platforms pro-Western figures, and once those guys are in power, they don't return the favor. They don't respect your speech. And Billy Bob Freestyle, I wanted to, our friend Skoidat, who he asked, why do you guys have more than one YouTube stream? It's because we all have our own channel. You can pick the one that you like. Billy Bob, you have your own channel. You have the Exposing Imperial Decline channel. I also have my channel. So we have several streams. So you can just pick the one you like.
Yeah, you can watch it on Facebook, on X, or at any number of our YouTube channels. There's a dedicated one for this program, and then there's my personal one and Ian's personal one. So let me launch into my 40-minute tirade about free speech, because I don't know. Again, I think there's a proper understanding about what's going on within which speech and speech rights make sense. I think I kind of heard from both of you to a little degree that there's this optimal freedom of speech that we really should be striving for. And to me, this is liberalism and this is idealism, and it's idealizing a particular thing and saying this is what we should want. And I think the reality is different. I think the reality is that the material conditions decide what is the optimal approach to any issue. And so the material conditions that exist today are class struggle, like what we had talked about earlier, where 6,000 years ago, a tiny minority of elites, have captured society and are trying to ensure that the systems that, society, embraces are disproportionately beneficial to themselves and to the detriment of the rest of us. And so they want to maintain these systems. And whereas the natural interests of the majority want improvement, they want a better system that works better for everyone, not just the wealthy elites. And so this is where freedom of speech comes in, because the elites are going to regulate speech or not, however they need to manage and maintain the system. Whereas you have successful revolutionary governments, might need to crack down on speech more because they're more vulnerable, and speech is used by the ruling elites, as a weapon, as a subversive weapon to infiltrate economies, infiltrate, governments and political parties. And so, and also to shape the opinions and the perspectives of the masses of people. And so, of course, China rightfully, protects their information space, does not allow Western oligarchs to buy mass media and to, use mass propaganda to indoctrinate people. Whereas in the West, they claim, no, we're free here. But in reality, we're not free, because what I'm saying isn't allowed to be platformed on any mass media. I think, what I'm saying is true. And I think any honest media would be saying exactly what I'm saying. But if anybody tried to say that on a mass platform, they'd immediately get deplatformed, just like Bernie Sanders got deplatformed for saying, hey, Cuba's not that bad. So I kind of reject this idea that there is a particular approach to speech that should be universally pursued, right? So it's always contextually dependent, and it always is up to whatever the material conditions are going to determine, how we should do it. And I'm just so when we talk about LGBTQ, and it's an interesting discussion, and how how it came about that all of a sudden people at my job, are putting their pronouns. Maybe 10 years ago, this started happening. You would just see their pronouns on their email signature. And at first I was like, what is this? I was way behind. I was out of it because, you would think you would even hear about it before you start seeing your supervisors do it. But once your supervisors do it, then you realize that, okay, well, we all have to conform now. It's interesting. And, from my perspective, I think the proper way to contextualize that and way to understand all of that is that it's a manufactured culture war designed to, cause people on both sides of that issue to engage with that issue, spend all their time on that issue, think that that issue is what politics is about, and then choose, one of the two oligarch political parties to champion, the anti-woke Republicans or the pro-woke Democrats. And I think all of that, is a designed, strategy to keep people ignorant, keep people occupied, and keep them from fighting the class war, which is, the masses, organizing together to force systemic change that, improve the system so it doesn't just benefit a tiny minority of billionaires to the detriment of the mass of the people. So, I mean, that's to me, that's all that needs to be said about the LGBTQ. I don't get excited about either side. It doesn't, I have no problem using pronouns if people want to identify. I'm not an asshole. I'm happy to not try and trigger them by telling them, you're a man. Like, that doesn't interest me. I don't care. I don't care enough. Like, I want a system that benefits, the masses of people, and that doesn't wage endless war, perpetual war, doesn't crash the global economy, doesn't pursue hegemony, at the expense of, tens of millions of unnecessary deaths, which I think, is right around the corner.
Yeah, just to add to that, the domestic function is to divide the population, and the international function is to construct a platform, a moral superiority, to construct
a regime change,
an image of Western liberal democracy, freedom of speech, and LGBT rights, and all of this stuff, to construct a facade of moral superiority. But yeah.
Well, about it's an interesting example. And actually recently a friend of mine in Moscow had asked me, what's the best, I don't remember exactly how he phrased the country, but the question was basically, what would be the best country to be transgender in? And I actually told him that Russia would not, I think right now Russia would be a better country to be, transgender in than the USA. And he's like, well, why? And the reason why is because it's in the USA, it's constantly pushed in your face, and everybody's constantly thinking about it. So if I was, wearing a dress and I just wanted to not be noticed, you kind of want to be in a country where people aren't constantly thinking about it. So if you go into a Russian restroom, people aren't staring at, people are minding their own business. They're not staring at you, trying to clock you. Is that a man? Is that a woman? What is that? They just don't care. They're not thinking about it all the time. And so if you're, I'm not transgender, but I would, if I put myself in their shoes, I would prefer to just have everybody not thinking about it constantly, because
that harms the LGBT community itself. The woke, totalitarianism is harmful to the LGBT community itself. It's become a cultural phenomenon that is. I think when legitimate rebellion is not accessible to people, when people have no means to launch actual rebellion against this oppressive reality that people live in, I think transgenderism becomes a kind of vehicle or a direction, a channel in which people can channel their discontent, their absolute disagreement with everything. So in a way, I absolutely respect trans people very much. Not only tolerate, I hate this word tolerance, but I actually think trans people are the avant-garde, are the radical, like okay, if I can't, change society, I'm going to change myself. I'm going to go out there and absolutely do something that's absolutely extreme, right? But the woke regime harms the LGBT community. It inflates this bubble of it inflates this wrong channel for rebellion, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the latest studies. The liberal media is silent about it. There's been several scientific studies that have come out about specifically transgenderism. I can, like, if I can remember, something like, I mean, first of all, it's reduced the number of teenagers who identify as transgender. It has reduced by like a significant 30-40% since merely 5-10 years ago, right? In the most recent 5 years, this is a drastic decline of the percentage of teenagers that identify as transgender. And also, well, there was another very important point, something about regret. How many people that have undergone sex reassignment surgery are regretting it. Now, all the liberals are going to cancel me for saying that, but that's just literally science. That's published medical, studies. So yeah, it's very tragic. It's very insidious how the power structure weaponizes these issues. And I mean, they don't give a fuck about trans people. They don't give a fuck about gay people. I mean, they just artificially use them in a way that like they're using Ukrainians, in a way like they're using Taiwanese, like they're using Germans, Europeans to fight their hegemonic wars. So in a way, it's a kind of a mirror of geopolitics, how these domestic issues are weaponized to create confusion.
I would elaborate on that last point you made about how they, I don't remember exactly how you described it, is to inflate. I think what they do is they commodify human conditions. They commodify your natural conditions and sell it back to you as a product. So people are born women, people are born men, or whatever. You have your innate sexuality. So they are. So it's a strive to take it and sell it back to you as a lifestyle. And an extreme lifestyle is actually the best because it's also the most expensive. The more extreme you go, whether it's actually, and there's other examples, not just switching sexes. You can look at the plus size lifestyle, the anorexic lifestyle. It's extreme, requires a lot of intervention, a lot of medical intervention, requires a lot of medical bills. It's a lot of expense, and someone is paying for it. Even if you have socialized medicine, someone is paying for it. It's just, but it's also kind of the opposite of the typical attitudes of the medical establishment, which is to give you the safest and most non-invasive treatment. If you come into the doctor and say, I have a headache, it's not going to be their first resort. Cut your skull open, give you a brain transplant, right? They're not, it's a lot, any kind of psychological or physical issue you have, typically they give you the safest, least invasive, and requires the least medications. You don't become dependent. But I've noticed with the whole transgender industry, it's the opposite. They want to hook you young. They want you to go as extreme as possible so you'll consume more of their products. But that's a tangent. I do want to say my main point, though, is that I disagree with the notion that it's just to divide people, because I think it's actually very useful. It's very useful to have these litmus tests, these loyalty tests, and when people don't pass those loyalty tests, you flush them out of the system. Doesn't mean you necessarily put them in camps or shoot them, but you can debank them. You can make them unemployable. These are all tools they have. We saw it a few years ago at the trucker protest in Canada. They debanked people. We see it with the Free Palestine protesters. They have those blacklists, which is like amazing. Like if I came out and said, "Oh, Jews have blacklists of people. You can't hire them. You'd be accused of being, an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist." But then, these schools just come out and say, "Yeah, there's the billionaires have this list of people who participated in a Palestine protest, and they will never be hired," which is it's astonishing. So these loyal, I wouldn't just say it's just woke for the sake of being woke or just to divide people. There is a it's like any other ideology or religion, which has elements which exist to gauge people's enthusiasm and their loyalty to that system. If you see a guy who's showing cracks, like, oh, is this guy a true believer? I don't think this guy's a believer, and invite scrutiny on that person. So if you look at wokeness that way, it makes a lot of sense. Because if you tell, like you said, your supervisor has pronouns in his bio, but then there's that subordinate guy on his team who's like, oh, I don't want to, or maybe I'll do it next week. That's suspicious. Why don't you want to do it? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's very true to a certain extent. That's very true to a certain extent. Most people who agree with all the woke stuff will agree on the U.S. interventionist wars abroad. Will believe that the West is for freedom and democracy.
I think you're kind of just describing, a regular tendency, a tribalistic tendency, and I think it can work for the anti-woke too. I'm sure there's anti-woke organizations that if you, say that you're woke, you're going to be treated the same way that you're going to be treated as a woke person in an anti-woke area or industry. So, and I mean, I could agree with you that maybe the majority of things are going woke. But of course, there's still a minority of anti-woke spaces where your wokeness is going to get you treated, as an outcast. But again, like, what is the point of all of this observation if not to, figure out what is going on and why and how we can improve what is going on. And, and I think, and that's why I focus on, how the ruling oligarchy weaponizes these things. And I think so, and that's why I feel that's the most important aspect of our discussion. Now, okay, I wanted to touch on a couple things. So the Espresso Stalinist is a great website. You can find all kinds of great Marxist literature and Marxist history. And for whatever reason, Skoidat's friend also is called Espresso Stalinist, and he wanted to be wished happy birthday by us. So I don't think that there's any relation between the website, which is a great resource, and Skoidat's friend, but happy birthday nonetheless. And then what else did I want to say?
Happy birthday, comrade Espresso Stalinist. Until victory.
What else? It's the same. How could it be the same person? I mean, that can't be. Oh, maybe the website, it's having its. I don't know. Maybe so. That's interesting. That's interesting. I need to learn more about who the people are behind the website Espresso Stalinist. So maybe there's one of the founders there whose its birth date is. I have no idea. This broader discussion of woke versus anti-woke. Very divisive, and people get canceled for picking the wrong side in the wrong place, and there's no doubt about that. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough for me to get really excited about it or really involved in it, other than to see how that benefits the ruling oligarchy, and to me that's just the only relevance of it. And we can see it in not just woke versus anti-woke. It's a political football, right? Wokeism, transgender bathrooms. It's a political football, very similar to immigration, drugs, religion. These are kind of ancillary issues, not really important to the core interests, the core economic and political interests of the ruling elite. And they can actually benefit their political interests by creating a both sides and then just stage managing, these culture war issues. And I know there's a lot of disagreement, among leftists. I know our friend from the truck driver from North Carolina, his name is for some reason escaping me, and he's gonna say it's not just two equal sides. He's gonna side with, the pro-immigration. He's gonna side with the pro-woke, and he's gonna champion that. And he's gonna say, no, I mean, I see what you're saying, Billy Bob, but it's more than that, and you can't just say it's.
He'll say you're a Nazi. He'll say you're a Nazi.
Okay, let's not put words in Dust's mouth. So no, he has a. We don't want to argue against him when he's not here. But my point is, it's a complex reality, and there's a lot of perspectives, and there's a lot of legitimacy to all sorts of perspectives. And before the show, me and Leo were talking about how, the reality can be like a cylinder. And if you look at a cylinder from a certain perspective, you see a circle. If you look at a cylinder from a different perspective, you see a rectangle. And they're both correct. And neither one of them are quote unquote wrong. It's just a matter of perspective. And then we also have the analogy of the elephant. Blind people feeling different parts of the element. Certain it's a certain thing, when in reality it's something far more complex than just that little thing that you're seeing or perceiving. So, I mean, with that in mind, it's just, it's good to, talk about the different perspectives and to analyze and to compare and contrast, what we see and how we see things and try and figure out what's going on. Again, with the ultimate purpose of improving things, raising awareness and facilitating understanding, in order to be able to improve things, I think is the whole point. And again, what does improvement look like? It's creating a system that benefits the minority of people, the majority of people, not just the wealthy elite minority. Anyway, that's my soapboxing, and I'm gonna let somebody else talk. Ian or Leo.
Yeah, the square, rectangle or circle thing. I mean, that absolutely applies, but to a certain part of the discussion, to a certain part of the issue, because fundamentally, I mean, we absolutely should be all anti-sexist. I mean, I'm going to be that is the communist view. That is the liberation view. If we want a better life for everyone, we should be anti-sexist. We should be anti-racist. Like, absolutely. And I'm resolutely anti-sexist, anti-racist, and anti-woke. Because wokeness to me is not a legitimate, is not a sincere, it's not sincere anti-sexism, and it's not sincere anti-racism. Wokeness is a some mutant like concoction that was devised in the ivory towers of liberal academy.
So my response is that I know Dust has made the point, which is correct, that wokeness used to be something good, right?
Sure.
It came from the inner city folks,
Sure.
saying are you woke? Do you really know what's going on?
Well, actually, I take issue with that, because in the very beginning, wokeness placed a disproportionate emphasis on personal identity issues. From the beginning, wokeness was used in the Black community to mean being awake to systemic racism, right? I mean, of course, that is a good thing, within the context of the Black community, but in the beginning, I think that's why it's weaponized so well, because in the beginning it emphasizes individual.
I think I can agree with that point.
Individual, issues.
And then you were being hyperbolic. No, you were being, what's the word? Because you were saying I'm anti-woke, but also anti-sexist and anti-racist, which a lot of people are going to consider to be a contradiction, right? And so you're kind of being what's that word? Sensational by saying I'm these contradictory things. Now, when you said anti-sexist, I wanted to argue that, because what does that mean? Does that mean that women have to be drafted into the military just like men? Like what exactly? How do you define anti-sexist? Because there are differences. the sexes are different, and I'm not sure the solution to our differences are to treat everybody the same, you know. But I think obviously gender equality, when we're talking about, if equal pay, I'm for equal pay, but at the same time, I don't really think they should be drafted. So it's a definitional thing, and it's like, I'm on board with not discriminating against women, but I don't know what you think that looks like, and certain people could say it means something that I would disagree with.
I agree with the Soviets' solution with the anti-sexism. I agree with CPC anti-sexism, which is to address the material equality first, right?
No, hey, Leo, I don't know if you realize this, but I just beat you.
Ah, I concede.
Thank you, Daryl. No, that's
Yeah. I mean, when freedom is defined, when equality is defined on the surface, on these superficial levels, you get it all kinds of contradictions, and it goes nowhere. It's like people banging their heads in a dead end alley. We're beating each other up in a dead end alley. So when you address the material conditions first, when you address the core issues that of sexism, right? We all emerge from feudalism, right? Every country in the world emerges from feudalism. Some had 300 years, 400 years of liberalism, capitalism, which did move people, at least on a more superficial level, beyond feudal sexist attitudes, right? But the socialist countries address this issue from a fundamental, from a radical, from a material perspective. Again, the first law that the CPC ever passed, ever drafted, and implemented was the very first law in 1951 or so, merely a year or two after the successful revolution, was the marriage equality law, which made it illegal for couples to have joint bank accounts. Because in the case of a joint bank account, because of our inherited feudal sexist attitudes and culture, the man always takes full control of the family's finances. Always, so the CPC made consecrated into law the financial independence of women, right? So in such a way, like the DDR, like people say, like, why does the DDR, Western liberal feminists would say, like, why did the DDR not have a feminist movement? That's a cause for incrimination. That's cause for criticism. But the fucking state itself was feminist, right? I mean, women had equal opportunity as men. Women were in positions of power and education. And of course, it's a historical process. Not everything was perfect, but they implemented fundamental policies which leads to the process, to increased liberation of women. Just like China is not perfect, right? Like somebody, this always comes up. Why in the CPC there are no women, right? I mean, that is, of course, an issue. That is an issue. But I would say that is a global issue. That is an issue with remnants of feudalism. That's also an issue within China itself also. Because China, like many places, did not have 300 years of liberalism, which did move people's attitudes somewhat away from feudal attitudes, if only on a more superficial level. But that's something that will come when the material conditions make possible the further steps towards liberation or equality.
Ian, you want to jump in before I launch us into what's going on in Iran?
No, it's good. I got 10 minutes left, but you can bring up Iran if you want.
I mean, I just want to, of course, I always want to explain what I think is going on with, current events. And I watch all the alternative media podcasts, and I see all the liberal critics of U.S. foreign policy, and they all have these criticisms about the U.S. The U.S. is just serving Israel. Why is the U.S. doing all these things? Why is Europe suiciding itself? And so the liberals have a really tough time making sense and explaining and understanding reality. And so when I watch them, I get really frustrated. And I'm like, you're so fucking dumb. You're stupid. Like, if you understood class, if you had a Marxist framework, and you understand that, you know, the ruling Western transnational oligarch elite control countries and use those countries to pursue their hegemonic class interests, things would make a lot more fucking sense to you. And so I always want to, you know, take a few minutes and push that agenda that I have about proselytizing this framework of mine, where I think things make total fucking sense. And so, you know, I just see that we've had this hot war with Iran. The U.S. used all of its missiles and things, and then it had to, you know, demand a ceasefire, which it got, and then it rearmed very quickly, and now it's threatening, you know, another large salvo to be unleashed against Iran. And we've had talks for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. We're gonna get a deal. We're gonna bomb them. We're gonna get a deal. We're gonna bomb them. And I just think that this is really entirely explainable, and I think that, you know, the liberal analysts that are hinging on every word and every up and down, you know, every contradictory statement that Trump says, and they're just trying to figure out what is going on. Like, to me, it's so obvious what's going on, you know, and you know, the big picture is pursuit of global hegemony for the Western ruling class that has enjoyed it since the end of feudalism, right? And so as history has played out, you know, they overthrew the hereditary monarchy. They instituted their capitalist system. They called it democracy, and it was really just oligarchy. And that oligarchy continues today, except it's under threat, right? It's under threat from a few sovereign nations that, you know, are resisting the, you know, to be vassals to the Western imperialists. And so, you know, primarily the peer rival is China. And then, of course, you've got Iran and Russia. And there's just a strategy going on right now to defeat and subvert, you know, these sovereign countries in order to attain, you know, global hegemony in the hands of this Western oligarchy throughout the rest of the 21st century, you know. And they enjoyed the unipolar moment at the end of 1991 when the Soviet Union dismantled itself in an internal coup. You know, they enjoyed this preeminence where they weren't threatened. Nobody was an obstacle. They could do whatever they wanted. And they see this slipping out of their hands. And so everything that we're seeing is predicated on their inexorable, I like this word, it's inexorable. Like, you know, they can't even stop themselves. Like the logic of capitalism, their system requires this inexorable pursuit of monopoly power. And when you talk about a finite globe, that, you know, monopoly power is global power. So, you know, they're going to identify, pursue, and try and, you know, destroy any obstacle to their global hegemony. And they can't help but do that. That is the logic of capital. And so this is what we're seeing play out. They have no interest in a peace deal with Iran. They have an interest in destroying Iran. And the same is true of Russia, and the same is true of China. And as they become more and more incapable of actually achieving these goals, we're going to see continued escalation. So continued escalation is the future. All talk about an agreement or you know, a peace deal, I believe, you know, is not true, right? Because, you know, there has not been a resignation to multipolarism. The Western elites have not said, you know what, we're going to be one nation among many equals, and that's going to be the future. No, it's the total opposite. They are preparing, they have been preparing, they are implementing, and they are pursuing plans for total global hegemony. And this involves, you know, destroying the global economy. It involves destroying the rules-based order, the game that they created, but they're now losing because China's winning it. And involves creating a new paradigm, you know, that is going to be disastrous for most countries, but they hope will benefit themselves, you know, and they're going to come out the other side in a stronger position relative to Iran, Russia, and China. And so again, we're at the very beginning of this strategy. We're at the very early stages, and I get that a lot of people do not have my clarity I call it clarity. Maybe a lot of people don't have my delusions, and so they reject what I'm saying, which is understandable because again, we're kind of at the very beginning of this. But I mean, to me, it's just so obvious, what this effort is about, and where it's headed. Like these are two very obvious things, and so I don't know. That's what animates me to talk about, because I think there's nothing more important than this, in my opinion. And so why things are going to get a lot worse around the planet, and why a deal is simply not going to happen. And so hinging on the news cycle and every word that Trump says, we're going to bomb them, we're going to have a deal. He just said this morning, right? I think within a week we should have a deal. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it could be some kind of a tactical retreat, but I doubt it. But even if it is just a tactical retreat, I mean, that doesn't mean that they've resigned themselves to multipolarism, and they have stopped trying to pursue, unipolar hegemony. And again, it's not a nation. It's not a nation state pursuing a national interest. It's a class of oligarchs that use nation states to pursue their hegemonic interests and to maintain a global system that they disproportionately benefit from, while the rest of humanity suffers under it, really. And there's vast room for improvement, but improvement for us, the majority, is not improvement for them. Things could not be better for them. This system could not be better. And so they're going to fight to maintain it, and they're going to make us sacrifice, for their struggle to maintain their own privilege. And that's kind of how I see things.
Absolutely.
And I don't know. I don't want to get the last word, though, but I know Ian has to leave soon. And
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, please.
Very quickly, lately I've become really averse. I've started to really not like and be against this phrase that's very common on the left: "No war but class war," right? I mean, because my reason is because this statement, "No war but class war," is used by the people who say that China and Russia are imperialist powers, and they are just fighting an inter-imperialist rivalry conflict right now. And Iran also, I don't know how you would get that, but so I would just like to point out that imperialist wars are class wars, because U.S. imperialism and the super profits that they reap from Africa, from Asia, from South America, is what makes possible the propping up of the deception of social democracy. Is what affords to pay off, to bribe the labor aristocracy in the imperial core, right? The super profits make it possible to uphold, to bolster, to support this illusion of, the West is capitalism is beneficial for everyone. Like, look, we developed, like, back in the 19th century. So all wars, even if China is not socialist, right? These wars would be still a struggle against the bourgeois class, because all of the anti-imperialist wars, like Haiti, right, the Haitian war against the French in whatever year it was, that is a class war, right? That is a class war. The Haitians were not communists, they were not socialists. They didn't talk about class struggle even, but that is a class war. All anti-colonial wars are class wars. So I just wanted to.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I always say that, the class war manifests itself today in the struggle against Western imperialism. Like, that's my thing that I say. But I hear what you're saying, because, a lot of people who say, hey, we can't choose between Ukraine and Russia. They're both capitalists fighting each other. No war but class war. And I reject those people. And I interpret it differently. I say, no, Russia is defending itself from imperialist aggression, and the fight against Western imperialism is how the class struggle manifests itself in the 21st century. And so, there's many perspectives and many ways to look at things and to articulate them. And they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, multiple perspectives can be correct. They're just different way of seeing the same thing. Ian, did you have anything to say about my diatribe, or are you content to give me the last word like a good co-host?
No, nothing I disagree with. So I will give you the last word on that. No disagreements for me.
Okay, that's boring, Ian. But
We're Americans. We like conflict. We like.
yeah, no, it's
Every movie ends with two guys battling it out, like to the jaw. Every single movie. When I first moved to the U.S., like I was so surprised. I was like, why does every movie end with two guys just like bare knuckles, like beating each other up? Like every movie, every action movie.
no, it's created in me a character defect where I'm only looking to argue. I don't care what you say that we agree on. Let's find that 0.1% where we disagree, and I will tell you why I'm right and you're wrong, because that's important to me. Anyway,
we all need a little bit of the African idea of consensus, that to realize that at the end of the day, all of our interests are basically the fucking same. Like we all want, freedom from homelessness. We all want, we all want the same things.
Yeah, and we're all gonna die, and so it's like I think a lot of these billionaires that are pursuing their own interests to the detriment of millions of people and increased mortality rates and mass death, they're just gonna die, and it's like I don't think they're really happy either. Like I don't think they've found happiness. It's just they have all this wealth, and their entire life is just so different and unimaginable than people that have to work for a living can even think about. But yeah, I'm sure they are. If we really knew them, oh shit, I don't want your life. Your life fucking sucks. I mean, we think, oh, look at all that money, you can do whatever you want. But yeah, I'm sure these people are. I mean, how can they be happy? Pursuing what they're pursuing. So anyway, Ian, thank you for the last word. Thank you for co-hosting with me today. We haven't streamed for a while. Leo, thank you for being our special guest. I'm seeing that we have a record high number of viewers right now as we're departing, but that's okay. So yeah, we will reconvene. Leo, we'll invite you back very soon. Maybe we will see everyone on Friday. Thank you very much.